Good morning. I was just listening to a YouTuber, and he was talking about some of the things that had happened in his life and about his childhood. The man is a little older than I am. He might be 10 years older than I am. But still, he grew up in the same type of an era I grew up in that same, just the way things were anyway back then. And so a lot of the things he talks about when he does talk about his childhood are things I can relate to. And when he was talking today about his childhood and about, how poor they were and everything, and he grew up in a home with good parents, hard-working parents, parents who weren't frivolous, who didn't waste or anything like that. And, it was just a struggle. They were poor, that's all. And I grew up in a similar situation. We were poor. Now, I didn't realize how poor we were because, of course, everybody we knew was poor. Some were far more poor than we were, really, so I didn't know. But what I want to tell you is I remember a conversation, or basically not so much a conversation. I remember 4 words that my dad said in 1972. And those words, I remember, they hit me kind of hard at the time because it was the first time I realized that we were poor, you know. And there certainly isn't anything wrong with being poor. A lot of good people are poor, you know. My dad, he was a hard-working man. He worked 15 hours a day as a tool and die maker in a factory. He was the first man there every morning to turn on the lights, and he was the man that locked the door at the end of the day, too. So he was the first there, and he was the last to leave, too, every day, 6 days a week. 15, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Of course, he didn't work on Sunday because that was the Lord's Day, and, there were laws about that. You just didn't do that. I'm sure they would have had him working on Sunday if they could have, though. Anyway, on payday, my dad, I'll back up a little bit here. My dad had a metal cash box. And when his bills would come in the mail, he put the bills in the metal cash box. And on payday, which came once a week, he'd take all the bills that he had in the cash box out, the ones that had arrived that week, and he'd lay them all out on the kitchen table, and he'd put stacks of money on top of each bill, to pay each bill. And then you'd start shifting the money around because there wasn't enough money to pay all the bills. So you'd shift the money around anyway. And to be sure that the bills that had to be paid right away were paid in full, and the rest at least had something paid on them. And like I say, we didn't live high off the hog. We lived in a mobile home. My dad's car was a 1962 Pontiac Parisienne that had been given to him by my grandpa, by his father. And how that came about was my dad needed a car, and at the time, in 1971, my grandpa bought a 1967 Pontiac Straddle Chief, and they weren't going to give grandpa anything for a trade, really, for the 62 Pontiac. They never give you very much on a trade, the car dealership. So, grandpa, he knew my dad needed a car, so he just gave my dad the 62 Pontiac. And that's how we had that. And we had that. We ate a lot of bologna, a lot of fried bologna. We ate a lot of Spam. We ate a lot of wieners, sausages, things like that. All meat that was fairly cheap at that time. And that's just how it was, And like I say, there were people worse off than we were, just a stone's throw away. But I do remember this one time my dad was going through the weekly ritual, laying the bills on top of the bills, basically laying the money on top of the bills. And he said these 4 words to my mom. He said, "Linda, we're in trouble." And I remember I was playing with some toy truck or something in the corner there, and he said that, and it hit me. That was the first time I realized that we were poor. I had no idea we were poor before that. And I was 4 years old, and I still remember how those words he said hit me, you know. And I realized there's not enough money to pay the bills. And I remember it frightened me a little bit. But, we got through. We did. We got through. Every week my dad worked things in such a way that we got through. And I guess the thing is, poverty, to a large degree, is a product of a person's mind. Yes, money factors into it, and I mean, when you're poor, there really isn't enough money to go around. There isn't enough. That's what poor is, really. In financial terms, at least, that's what poor is. But still, to a large degree, poverty is a state of mind. And as an innocent child, I never thought of poverty. Even though I was living in it, I never thought of it because my parents did such a good job sheltering me from it for the most part. And plus, everybody around us was living the same. So, when that's all you know, well, then you don't really think of it the same as you might if you knew something else. I can honestly say my upbringing was hard in a lot of ways, and there was dysfunction in my family and all that stuff. But I wouldn't trade it for anything, I really wouldn't. I'm glad I grew up when and how I did. And, poverty doesn't make you and poverty doesn't break you. The same is true with money. It doesn't make you or break you. And you can have it or not. It's what's inside